Welcome to WION, Dr. Kumar.
Thank you.
Dr. Kumar, before moving ahead, I just want to read out one of the quotations of Dr. Singh. He said that history will be kinder to me than contemporary media. You have personally worked with Dr. Singh. Talk to us about your experiences while working with him, and if there's any anecdote that you want to share with us.
Well, undoubtedly, his prophecy has come true. He has said earlier, as we recounted in a press conference in New Delhi, that history would judge him more kindly. Within a few hours of his passing, considering the tributes that have been paid to him and to his work and to his memory from across the world and across political spectrum in the country, his prophecy has come true. History is turning a page and beginning to judge him more kindly. He deserved the respect and affection of his people in every sense of the term. He was an exceptional man in every way, in terms of his intellect, in terms of integrity, in terms of humility, grace, compassion, kindness, wisdom, and his great learning. And it was not for nothing that the likes of President Obama and Angela Merkel sought his counsel on complex, grave challenges that the world faces in common. I have many memories about Dr. Manmohan Singh ji. And if I begin to recount all of them, it would take the whole day. But I can certainly recount a few very pleasant conversations I had with him during the course of my official interactions with him. I remember once a very complex question about raising of the poverty line had come up in Parliament, and I was then the Minister of State for Planning. And in the morning briefing with officials before answering the questions in Parliament, during the question hour, there was a divergence of views on whether we should agree to altering the poverty line a formula, or whether we should let it be as it is. There were very many informed people who were in that meeting, and I was of the view that we could not stick to the Tendulkar formula because it had become, in my view, irrelevant at that particular point of time. There were many other colleagues in that meeting. It was a very important briefing meeting. He listened to each one of us on a subject about which he was the final authority. And then he turned to me and said, if you think that this is the right approach to the matter as the Minister of State, go ahead and do it. The meeting ended, and later on, when we were just together for a minute before going off to the house, he said to me that this is going to be a very tough question for you, and be prepared for many supplementaries. This was the Prime Minister I've known. This was the person who was always concerned about how his colleagues would be treated in Parliament and how he could and what he could do to assist them. He was not like a principal to us. He was not like a headmaster to us. He was like a friend, a knowledgeable friend who was always willing to hold our hand. And never once did he lose his temper on any one of us. In fact, even when some of the ministerial colleagues were not saying things that were complimentary about the government, and some of us went and told Dr. Singh that he should please ask his colleagues and not to say negative things in public, he said to me very clearly that I don't intend to be a headmaster. They are sufficiently mature enough to know what they should be saying and what they should not be saying. So Dr. Manmohan Singh's simplicity and his magnanimity is sometimes treated as his weakness. Far from it. He was a man with a steely resolve, as we had seen in the Indo-US civil nuclear deal. He staked his office, the office of the Prime Minister, to do what he thought was right by the nation and what was right by his conscience. He once told me that no Prime Minister is worth the office he holds if he cannot take key decisions that are, in his considered view, in the best interest of the nation. Right. We are privileged to have had Dr. Dr. Manmohan Singh as our Prime Minister. His loss has impoverished the Congress Party and has impoverished the nation. But I do hope that his life, his conduct, and his leadership would be the guiding star for the future politics in this country.
Absolutely, Dr. Kumar. Like you also mentioned, Dr. Singh was known as a man of few words, but that of profound and great impact. And like you also narrated that anecdote that beyond politics, Dr. Singh was perhaps unafraid to challenge policies. Just want to seek your perspective more on how Dr. Singh's policies have had a lasting impact in India, from the economic liberalization to the historic US deal.
Well, the 1991 economic liberalization is owed entirely to him. Of course, Mr. Narasimha Rao supported him, but he was the architect of the economic reforms. And then India never looked back from after 1991. We were on the trajectory to becoming one of the fastest growing economies of the world. And for the 10 years of his prime ministership, we had an average GDP growth of about 8%, again unprecedented in the history of this country. Of course, his commitment to education as the greatest empowerer was anchored in his own life's experience. He often told me that but for my education, I would never have been where I have been. And if you were to see the record of his achievements, if anybody could just peep into his CV, there's not a single award or which he has not received, national or international. The only one that remains is the Bharat Ratna, and I have no doubt that this government will confer that award on him, or should confer that award on him. He had PhDs from every major university of the world, Cambridge, Oxford, and you name it, and he had it. His CV reads about 7 or 8 pages of just the awards and the degrees he has had. But he carried his intellectual greatness lightly on his sleeve. He was so humble, in fact, humble to the point of a fault, and so gracious that it was difficult to acknowledge that somebody like him still existed in the political firmament of our country. This was the time when the graces of Dr. Manmohan Singh, his sagacity, his magnanimity, and his humility were needed in this country.
Right, Dr. Kumar. Dr. Singh, he adorned many offices, from the RBI governor to the FM and to the Prime Minister for 2 consecutive terms. Like you also mentioned, that the list of accolades of Dr. Singh is numerous. But if you could perhaps name few of the hallmarks of Dr. Manmohan Singh's Prime Ministership.
Well, in the US nuclear deal, of course, the primary one, the right to education, the Aadhaar initiative, the Manrega, the highest ever allocation for education in the 12th five-year plan. And I must recount one instance since you asked me. When I took charge as Minister of State in the Ministry of Planning, I came to know that India was lagging in the supercomputing capability. I convened a meeting of top-ranking officials and asked them the reason for that. And they said that since India had not been able to develop the overall ecosystem for very fast supercomputing use, we were not investing as much as we should be in supercomputing, although for every strategic national initiative, supercomputing was a necessity. In 2007, China, in 2011, we were beaten by China in supercomputing capability. Of course, China had moved ahead a couple of years ago. And I said, what is now required to be done? And I was told that it would require about 5,000 to 6,000 crores of investment for creating that capability. I wrote a DO letter to the Prime Minister listing out the reasons why we should not miss in the race of supercomputing capability and why we must urgently release about 5,000 to 6,000 crores for kickstarting this initiative. Within 10 days, I got the approval from the Prime Minister for an investment of 6,000 crores which was beyond the budgetary provisions. This was Dr. Manmohan Singh. If an idea appealed to him, he would go all out to make sure that the idea was implemented. He headed his the National Science Commission as the Prime Minister. He was the ex-officio chairman, with all the top minds of the country sitting around the table. He could discuss with them, the top scientists, any subject of extreme technicality and science with them as an equal. Such was his learning. Such was his command over everything that he presided over. I don't think after Pandit Nehru we would have got a prime minister with such learning and such wisdom, such grace and such magnanimity.
Right, Dr. Kumar, thank you so much for joining us on WION and sharing your thoughts and anecdotes with us.
Thank you. Thank you.